leadership, certainly really matters, and particularly professional leadership. And Dr. Adlestein was one of the giants within our movement, and I had great privilege and honor of actually spending a good deal of time with him early in my career as as part of the whole foundations that were laid. And I've shared this story before, and I do think that it's important to touch base with it on an ongoing basis. That Stan Miller, who many of you knew, was the Secretary of Welfare with Governor Schaefer, and he went out to visit the institutions he was responsible for as secretary. And literally, as Joe told the story, he came back to his office literally crying because of the horror and the tremendous suffering that he saw within the institutions. And he went into Dr. Adlestein's office, who was his commissioner for mental health and mental retardation, and he said, "Joe, this is wrong. We have got to do something." And Dr. Adlestein already had the beginning of what a community system of care would look like, and had a concept paper in his drawer that he literally pulled out when Stan came to his office, and he said, "Stan, this is what we're going to do." And that was eventually passed by the legislature, as the Mental Health and Mental Retardation Act. And I think what is so extraordinary about that is that was at a time when there were no models, there was no place to go to figure out what the alternative was going to be, to this residual stage of the eugenics movement that had millions of people in the United States locked away in large inhumane institutions. And that act was an incredibly creative document to conceptualize the community program that still operates today, and that act still serves as the foundation of it. I was, still as a state hospital employee, was part of a staff sharing project where I was sent to the community mental health program in Dauphin County that was part of the Dauphin County Mental Health and Retardation Program. And Dr. Adlestein was the medical director at Brady Hall at the Harrisburg Hospital. And we had a chance to really work very closely. And as I was thinking about this, there were many times that he and I would be on the floor with someone who was having uncontrolled seizures, which was very common at that time in the development of care of seizures, being with a person trying to minimize any kind of injuries or as a result of the seizure activity. And when became involved with Keystone and eventually decided to think seriously about becoming the founding president of Keystone, I talked to him about his advice because he was really quite a mentor, and he wasn't really encouraging, but said that he would certainly want to support that. And it wasn't until somewhere, I think it was around our 30th anniversary, that he told me that he really thought it was one of the dumbest things he ever heard for someone to leave a really good job, go with an organization that didn't exist. And part of what he offered Keystone at that time is he provided our first office in Brady Hall on the 5th floor, and literally it was Joe's coat room that was 8 feet by 5 feet, and I spent the first year in that. And then eventually a more substantial area in one of the general offices, and then onward to some of the more structured administrative space. But he was a true giant within this, and it's on his shoulders that so much of what has happened over these 40 years has been built. And one of the insights that he ended up his career as a professor in medicine at the Milton S. Hershey Medical School. And he told me towards the end of his career that he had finally concluded that medicine was fundamentally a spiritual endeavor. And that is something perhaps that we should really all try to remind ourselves as our healthcare system undergoes what will be a pretty profound transformation. That he clearly was one of the people that was a real healer and reached out and touched people in a very human, caring and compassionate way. And set an example for a whole generation of young people who would end up working and taking leadership roles within this movement. Joe's example of his leadership is shared by tonight's recipient, Betsy Newville, who has many of the same very deep commitments and qualities that Dr. Adlestein had. Someone who really is a healer and who really reaches out and is able to touch people in a very supportive and caring and compassionate way. Betsy, why don't you come up and join us here? Betsy came to Keystone in 1988 when she was 12 years old. And she had already had fairly extensive experience working within the community movement and specifically in the area of the principles of normalization, and had already a very deep commitment to human services as a career calling. Now, Betsy worked in support of many individuals reestablishing their lives and dreams in the community as they came out of some of our large institutions during that period into the Lancaster community, and had a really big role in helping to close many of those institutions. Betsy was eventually promoted as executive director of what was Keystone Residents of Lancaster County and grew into a fairly large organization under her leadership. She served as executive director of Keystone Residents of Lancaster for 13 years, and then moved into what is the Keystone Institute, which is our internal organization that does internal consulting and training and leadership development from a values-based perspective, particularly using the principles of social role valorization and person-centered planning. Now, through the Institute, Betsy provides training and really builds teams of people operating, at the program level who have, the direct contact with the people that we support, and it has an impact on all facets of our organization. The Institute really specializes, in providing these values-based educational experiences because we encounter some of the most difficult aspects within the human experience where people really have to approach the issues in a very caring and very thoughtful way. Elizabeth has worked really extensively with the ideals that are encompassed within the principles of normalization and social role valorization. Betsy is a fully accredited team leader and trainer by the North American Social Role Valorization movement, and served as a senior trainer within that movement. Betsy's taught SRV and social role valorization throughout Canada, through the United States, Ireland, Holland, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Romania, and the Republic of Moldova, where it's had a huge impact. Charlie and I had a chance to visit some of our programs in Moldova about 2 months ago, and particularly some of our brand new residential programs. And I was so thrilled to see those programs were really reflective of our vision of community services that exist here, and to a large extent, that is a huge product of Betsy's work in terms of training and leadership development with our colleagues and employees within Moldova. Betsy has had a lifelong commitment to people that are very vulnerable to really reach out and give them the opportunity to be valued and fully participating members of society. Along that, some of the teaching and education that she does includes topics such as hospitality, the American eugenics movement, person-centered planning, moral treatment from a historical perspective of institutions, organizational values, and other areas that help people really approach their work as a calling and helping them experience that as being part of a very important movement. So Betsy, besides her work at Keystone Institute, is very interested and passionate about prison reform, the abolishment of the death penalty, and she and her husband Thomas and daughter Sarah and Stephen, Stephen not able to be here tonight, join her in those commitments. They live in New Holland, and as a family really share values of animals and outdoors and offering hospitality to others. So Betsy, thank you for what you've really done on behalf of other people and being such an important part of Keystone's leadership over these years.
Dennis, and thank you also to you, Shirley, for giving us an introduction and context for this. For those of you who've been in my workshops before, don't worry, I'll be brief. Just a couple of things to say in reflecting on my work at Keystone. One is that I think Joe Adlestein, when he crafted what was going to be the Act of 1966, he gave us a really powerful message that said we can do better than what is today. We can do better. And one of the things that drew me to Keystone, I think, was a real commitment not only to say we can do better, but to help us figure out how to search for what really will be better for people. And that search remains probably as relevant, maybe even more urgent today than it did, at least when I came on the scene in 1988 here at Keystone. I got really clear messages from Dennis, from Thomas at the time, the early on people who were involved, that said that doing what's just okay for people, that's not going to be enough. Not for the people that we were meeting in the institutions. Like, we had to do it right. And that was a very strong message to me, and one that really, I think, formed and shaped me in some pretty powerful ways in thinking about how do we help people have a better life. And there was a real path laid here in ways that just drew me to that path that were just very, very powerful. I think Burton Black, some of you may remember, he laid part of that pathway for us. When he took the photographs from the institutions and put them in a book and wrote essays about it, and we saw pictures, of what, were scenes of human cruelty that, none of us could believe. And Dennis, when I came to Keystone, said, and it's mandatory that you read this as part of your orientation, that's part of the path. And Dr. Adlestein laid part of that path, when, he made a document that said, vulnerable people, they belong to us, to our communities, to our neighborhoods, and structured a service system that said, we're going to do this together. It's not somebody else's responsibility. Let's figure out how we can lift everybody up. That is shaping a path that all of us, in some way in this room, I think, have followed. Wolfensberger laid a path for us, when he impassioned many of us here in this room, who heard these ideas about how do you get to be at the bottom of the social ladder, and then how do you walk with people to get out of the bottom. It was like strategy, like, okay, here's how you do it. Here's how to help people have real home and real work and people who are going to walk with them and stand up for them. That was part of the path. And so, I think for me, it's been so, enhancing to my life to be involved with an organization that has said, we're doing this together. And if I've been able to lay a couple of, mile markers along the route or a couple of road signs, then I'm grateful for that opportunity. I'm happy to be recognized for that, but I'm also really happy to have a group of people here that are walking that path with me. So thank you all for that.